I was standing in my empty apartment, holding a positive pregnancy test, when my phone buzzed with a text from my ex-husband. Saw your promotion announcement. Congratulations. We need to talk. My hands were shaking as I stared at those words. Mason. The same man who divorced me 18 months earlier because I was broken and couldn't give him children. The same man who'd told me our 3 years of fertility treatments had turned me into someone he couldn't love anymore. And now? Now I was pregnant with another man's baby, successful in my career, and genuinely happy for the first time in years. The irony was so perfect it almost felt like the universe was playing a joke. You see, sometimes life has a twisted sense of humor. Sometimes the thing you desperately want with the wrong person becomes effortless with the right one. And sometimes the people who abandon you when you're struggling want back in when you're thriving. My name is Jennifer, and this is the story of how losing everything I thought I wanted led me to everything I actually needed. But here's the thing that will shock you most. By the time my ex came crawling back, I didn't want revenge anymore. I had something much better. I had a life worth living. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand just how devastating Mason's betrayal was to appreciate how sweet my victory became. Before we dive in, I'd like to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if you're new here, welcome to Revenge with Nick, the channel where betrayal gets exposed and justice always wins. Hit that subscribe button and please ring the notification bell. It all started 18 months earlier. I was making dinner in our kitchen when Mason came home from work. The sound of his keys hitting the counter had become different lately, heavier, more deliberate. We need to talk, he said, loosening his tie without even looking at me. My stomach dropped. In 4 years of marriage, nothing good had ever followed those words. The lasagna's almost ready, I said, hoping to delay whatever was coming. Jennifer, I can't do this anymore. He sat at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd planned our future, discussed baby names, marked fertility treatment dates on the calendar. What do you mean? But I already knew. The distance between us had been growing for months. I mean us. This clinical routine we've become. The shots, the appointments, the temperature charts. We're not a married couple anymore. We're lab partners in some experiment that isn't working. The timer for the oven beeped, but I couldn't move. Mason, we knew this would be hard. The doctor said. The doctor said a lot of things. 3 years ago. How much more time are we supposed to waste? Waste. He called our efforts to build a family a waste. I've been seeing someone, he continued, his voice matter of fact. Victoria from my office. For about 6 months now. The words hit me like cold water. 6 months. While I'd been giving myself hormone injections and tracking ovulation cycles, he'd been having an affair. She makes me feel alive again, he said, as if that justified everything. Like the person I used to be before all this medical stuff took over our lives. I finally found my voice. So you're leaving me for someone who makes you feel alive? I'm leaving because we've become strangers living like roommates, going through the motions of trying to create something that maybe we're just not meant to have. That night, Mason packed a bag. The smell of his cologne lingered in our bedroom for weeks after he left. I used to love that scent. Now it just reminded me of betrayal. Think about the person you trust most in your life right now. How would you feel if they told you that fighting for your dreams together was a waste of time? The pain I felt that night was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, but it was just the beginning of a journey that would show me what I was really made of. The divorce process took 8 months. 8 months of dividing our life into his and hers, of explaining to friends why Mason wasn't coming to gatherings anymore, of facing the pitying looks from people who knew about our fertility struggles. Our apartment felt enormous and empty with just me in it. The sound of my footsteps echoed differently. Even the refrigerator hummed louder, as if it was trying to fill the silence Mason had left behind. The worst part was the medical bills. Thousands of dollars in fertility treatments that we were both still responsible for. Every month, those statements arrived like little reminders of our failure. Of my failure, as Mason saw it. I remember one particularly low evening, about 3 months after he moved out. I was eating cereal for dinner because I hadn't bothered to grocery shop properly when my friend Rachel called. Jen, I have to tell you something, she said carefully. I saw Mason and Victoria at that new restaurant downtown. They looked happy. Happy. While I was eating cereal alone and struggling to pay bills he'd helped create. I'm sorry, Rachel continued. I debated calling, but I thought you should know he's moved on completely. After I hung up, I sat on my couch and cried. Not just for my marriage, but for the version of myself I'd lost somewhere in those 3 years of medical appointments and hormone treatments. I'd become so focused on trying to get pregnant that I'd forgotten who I was outside of that struggle. The woman Mason fell in love with, confident, ambitious, funny. Where had she gone? Have you ever looked in the mirror and not recognized the person staring back? That was me for months after Mason left. But sometimes, rock bottom becomes the solid foundation you need to rebuild your entire life. If you've ever felt completely lost, you'll understand what happened next. You know, sharing these raw moments isn't easy, but I hope my story helps someone who's going through their own dark time. If you've ever felt abandoned when you needed support most, please share your experience in the comments. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone in our struggles. And if this story is resonating with you so far, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to Revenge with Nick. Your support means the world to me and helps me continue sharing these important stories. I threw myself into work like my life depended on it. In many ways, it did. I was a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising firm, a job I'd been coasting through while most of my mental energy went to fertility treatments. But now, with nothing else to focus on, I discovered I was actually good at this. My first project after the divorce was a campaign for a local restaurant chain. I stayed late every night, perfecting layouts, researching target demographics, analyzing competitor strategies. The office cleaning crew got used to seeing me there at 9 p.m. You sure you don't want to go home, honey? Maria, one of the cleaners, would ask. It's not healthy, all this working. I'm fine, I'd say, though we both knew that wasn't true. But slowly, something started to shift. The campaign I'd been pouring my heart into was performing better than anyone expected. Sales were up 23% in the first month. Jennifer, my boss, Mr. Peterson, called me into his office 6 months after my divorce was finalized. Your restaurant campaign is the best work this department has produced in 2 years. I'm impressed. For the first time in months, I felt a flutter of pride. Not about my ovulation schedule or hormone levels, but about something I'd accomplished through my own skill and dedication. Then Mr. Peterson dropped a bombshell. I'm retiring next month. The company is bringing in someone new to head this department. I've recommended that they take a close look at your recent work. A week later, David Williams walked into our office. He was tall, probably mid-30s, with kind eyes and an air of quiet confidence. During his introduction meeting, he spoke about innovative marketing strategies and collaborative leadership. But what struck me most was how he treated everyone, from the senior staff to the interns, with the same respectful attention. When he asked questions about our current projects, he actually listened to the answers. I'm looking forward to seeing what this team can accomplish, he said. I believe great marketing comes from understanding real human experiences and emotions. After the meeting, my colleague Susan whispered, he seems different from Peterson. Actually interested in what we do. I nodded, but I was thinking about something else. When David spoke about human experiences and emotions, I'd felt a recognition I hadn't expected. Like maybe my own difficult experiences could actually be valuable in ways I hadn't considered. Over the next few weeks, David scheduled one-on-one meetings with everyone on the team. When my turn came, I was nervous, but determined to show him the work I'd been doing. Jennifer, I've been reviewing your restaurant campaign, he said, looking through a folder of my presentations. The emotional messaging here is sophisticated. You've identified pain points other marketers miss. Thank you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tell me, how did you know to focus on the comfort food for uncomfortable times angle? That insight drove the whole campaign's success. I hesitated. The honest answer was that I'd been living through uncomfortable times and knew exactly what people needed to hear. But admitting that felt too personal. Market research showed people were looking for emotional connection with brands during stressful periods, I said instead. David nodded, but his expression suggested he suspected there was more to the story. Well, whatever your process, it's working. I'm promoting you to senior coordinator, effective immediately. After 4 years of feeling like a failure at the one thing I'd wanted most, someone was telling me I was succeeding at something I'd barely known I was capable of. That night, I called my mom to share the news. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," she said. "You sound different. Stronger." She was right. For the first time since Mason left, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just surviving. But I had no idea that this promotion was just the beginning of changes that would transform my entire life. Working for David was unlike anything I'd experienced in my career. Where my previous boss had been hands-off to the point of neglect, David was engaged without being micromanaging. He'd stop by my desk to discuss campaign strategies, always treating my ideas as valuable contributions rather than suggestions he might consider. When I proposed a complete overhaul of our approach to a struggling client, he didn't dismiss it. "Walk me through your thinking," he said, pulling up a chair to sit beside my desk rather than towering over me. I explained my analysis of why their current messaging wasn't resonating, my voice growing more confident as I saw him taking notes. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need," he said when I finished. "Let's schedule a presentation with the client for next week. You'll lead it." "Me? Led a client presentation? Are you sure?" "I've never." "Jennifer, you know this campaign better than anyone. Trust yourself. Trust yourself." When was the last time Mason had said anything like that to me? The presentation went better than I'd dared hope. The client approved our new direction, and within 2 months, their sales had increased by 30%. But it wasn't just professional success that was changing me. It was the way David treated me as a complete person, not just an employee recovering from personal trauma. One Thursday evening, I was staying late to finish a proposal when David appeared with 2 cups of coffee from the place downstairs. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting one on my desk. "You didn't have to do that," I said, but I was touched by the gesture. "You've been putting in incredible hours lately. Just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself too." We ended up talking for an hour about marketing philosophy, career goals, even books we'd been reading. It was the first real conversation I'd had with a man in months that didn't involve lawyers or divorce proceedings. "Can I ask you something?" David said as we were packing up to leave. "You mentioned being recently divorced. That must have been a difficult adjustment." I tensed slightly. I'd kept my personal life carefully separate from work, but David's tone was genuinely concerned, not prying. It was, I admitted. But honestly, focusing on work has been therapeutic. Reminds me that I'm capable of more than I thought. "Divorce is tough," he said quietly. "I went through mine about 2 years ago. The hardest part was remembering who I was outside of that relationship." I looked at him with surprise. David had seemed so confident, so settled. "You're divorced." 2 years now. "I have a 9-year-old daughter, Sophie. We have joint custody." He smiled, and his whole face changed. "She's the brightest part of my life, but navigating co-parenting while building a career, it's challenging." Suddenly, David's occasional early departures and weekend unavailability made sense. He wasn't just a dedicated professional, he was a father balancing work and parenting. "That must be hard," I said. "It is, but it's also taught me what really matters. And what kind of partner I want to be if I ever get serious about someone again." There was something in his voice, a depth that came from real experience with loss and recovery. I recognized it because I was living it myself. As we walked to our cars, I realized this was the first time in months that I'd felt genuinely understood by someone. Not pitted, not treated like damaged goods, but seen as a whole person with valuable perspectives shaped by difficult experiences. That night, I found myself thinking about David's comment about remembering who he was outside his marriage. I was still figuring out who Jennifer was when she wasn't desperately trying to get pregnant or recovering from Mason's betrayal. But maybe that was okay. Maybe discovering yourself wasn't supposed to be a quick process. Have you ever had someone see potential in you that you couldn't see in yourself? David's belief in my abilities was starting to rebuild my confidence in ways I hadn't expected. And that confidence was about to open doors I never imagined. It's amazing how the right person can help you see your own worth, isn't it? Have you ever had a boss, mentor, or colleague who truly believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you're enjoying Jennifer's journey of rediscovering her strength, please consider hitting that like button. It really helps me know which stories resonate most with you. And subscribing to Revenge with Nick means you'll never miss these powerful stories of transformation. 3 months into working for David, everything changed because of a September morning that started with chaos. I was reviewing campaign budgets when David appeared at my desk, looking frazzled in a way I'd never seen before. "Jennifer, I have an enormous favor to ask," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Sophie's school just called. They're closing early due to a burst pipe, and my ex-wife is out of town on business. I need to pick her up, but I have the Morrison client presentation in an hour." I could see the stress in his shoulders. The way his usual calm demeanor was cracking under the pressure of conflicting responsibilities. "What if I handle the Morrison presentation?" I offered without thinking. "I know that campaign inside and out." "Are you sure? It's a big account, and Morrison can be particular." "I'm sure. You need to take care of Sophie." The relief in his eyes was immediate. "You're a lifesaver." The presentation materials are in my office, and my notes are in the blue folder. 40 minutes later, I was standing in our conference room, facing 3 executives from Morrison Industries and trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. The presentation went smoothly until Mr. Morrison asked a question about demographic targeting that wasn't covered in David's notes. For a moment, panic fluttered in my chest. Then I remembered my own research, insights I developed but hadn't included in the formal presentation. "That's an excellent question," I said, walking to the whiteboard. "Based on my analysis of your customer data, I think there's an opportunity you might not have considered." I spent the next 10 minutes outlining a strategy that had occurred to me weeks earlier, but that I'd been too hesitant to suggest. The Morrison team was taking notes, asking follow-up questions, nodding with obvious interest. When they left, Mr. Morrison shook my hand firmly. "Ms. Jennifer, that targeting strategy could revolutionize our approach. We want to move forward immediately." I was still processing the success when David returned an hour later with a little girl who had his same kind eyes and a backpack covered in cartoon characters. "Sophie, I want you to meet Jennifer," David said. "She just saved Daddy's biggest presentation." Sophie looked up at me with the serious expression children sometimes get when evaluating new adults. She was smaller than I'd expected, with long brown hair in a braid that was coming loose and a gap where she'd recently lost a tooth. "Do you work with my dad?" she asked. "I do. We make advertisements together." "Like the ones on TV?" "Sometimes," I said, crouching down to her eye level. "What kind of TV shows do you like?" For the next 20 minutes, while David handled post-presentation calls, Sophie and I talked about cartoons, her favorite books, and the art project she was working on at school. She was bright and curious, with an enthusiasm that was infectious. "I'm hungry," she announced eventually. "There are some crackers in my desk drawer," I offered. "And I think there might be some apple juice in the break room fridge." As I helped her wash her hands and got her settled with a snack, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the natural ease of caring for a child. Not the clinical, scheduled, pressure-filled process that fertility treatments had become, but simple, instinctive nurturing. "Jennifer," David said when he finished his calls, "I can't thank you enough. The Morrison presentation and Sophie, you've gone above and beyond." It was nothing, I said, but we both knew that wasn't true. "Sophie, what do you think of Jennifer?" David asked his daughter. "She's nice," Sophie said seriously. "And she knows about good cartoons. Can she come to my soccer game on Saturday?" David looked embarrassed. "Sophie, Jennifer has her own life on weekends. She doesn't need to." "Actually, I heard myself saying, I'd love to come to your soccer game. If that's okay with your dad." Saturday afternoon, sitting on aluminum bleachers watching a group of 9-year-olds chase a soccer ball around a field, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: contentment. Not the desperate hope of fertility treatments or the hollow distraction of overworking, but genuine happiness in the moment. Sophie scored a goal in the second half and immediately looked toward the bleachers to make sure David and I had seen. When she waved, I waved back, and my heart did something I'd almost forgotten it could do. After the game, David suggested ice cream, and somehow the 3 of us ended up spending the entire afternoon together. At the ice cream shop, Sophie sat between us, chattering about her team and her friends, occasionally reaching over to steal bites of my sundae. "She really likes you," David said quietly while Sophie was distracted by a dog outside the window. "She's an amazing kid. You've done a great job with her. It's not always easy, especially the single parenting parts. But she makes everything worth it." There was something in his voice, a combination of love and protectiveness and slight exhaustion that I recognized as genuine parental devotion. "Her mom, your ex-wife, does she see Sophie often?" David's expression shifted slightly. "Every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. Rachel's not a bad person, just, we wanted different things. She felt tied down by family life, wanted more excitement and spontaneity. Found that with someone else." The pain in his voice was carefully controlled but unmistakable. He'd been abandoned too, in a different way but for similar reasons. Someone he loved had decided their shared life wasn't enough anymore. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's okay. Rachel's happier now and Sophie's adjusting well. But it taught me that I want my next relationship to be with someone who sees family as an adventure, not a burden." That evening, as I drove home from what had unexpectedly become the best day I'd had in months, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time since Mason left, I'd spent hours not thinking about my failed marriage, my fertility struggles, or my uncertain future. I'd simply been present, enjoying the company of two people who seemed to genuinely enjoy mine in return. Over the following weeks, David and I began having coffee together most mornings before the office got busy. These weren't formal meetings, just two colleagues who discovered they enjoyed talking to each other. But our conversations went deeper than work talk. "Can I ask you something personal?" David said one Thursday morning as we sat in the small conference room that had become our unofficial coffee spot. "Sure. Yesterday, when you were explaining the emotional angle for the Peterson campaign, you said something about understanding what it feels like when people don't believe in your strength. That wasn't just market research, was it?" I stirred my coffee slowly, considering how much to share. David had been open with me about his divorce, but my situation felt more complicated, more potentially embarrassing. "My ex-husband left me after 3 years of fertility treatments," I said finally. He said the process had made our marriage feel clinical, like we were lab partners instead of a couple in love. David was quiet for a moment. "That must have been devastating. Going through medical struggles and losing your marriage at the same time. The worst part was feeling like I'd failed at the one thing I was supposed to be naturally good at. Being a woman, being a wife, creating a family." Mason made it clear that he saw me as broken. Mason was an idiot. The certainty in David's voice surprised me. "You don't even know the whole story. I know you. I've seen how you handle pressure, how you care about people, how you treat my daughter like she matters. If Mason couldn't see that you're extraordinary, that's his loss, not your failure." Something in my chest loosened at his words. For months, I'd carried Mason's assessment of me as truth, that I was damaged, that I'd become someone unlovable. Sometimes I wonder if he was right, though, I admitted. Maybe I did become too focused on getting pregnant. Maybe I stopped being the woman he fell in love with. "Jennifer, listen to me." David leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "People go through difficult times. That's when you find out what your partner is really made of. A good partner supports you through the struggle, doesn't abandon you because it's not fun anymore." I looked at him across the small table, struck by the conviction in his voice. "When Rachel left me," he continued, "I blamed myself for months. I thought if I'd been more exciting, more spontaneous, maybe she wouldn't have gotten bored. But my therapist helped me understand that Rachel's choice to have an affair and leave wasn't about my failings, it was about her character." "You wanted therapy?" "Individual counseling and co-parenting counseling. Best investment I ever made. Helped me understand that I deserved a partner who wanted to build a life together, not someone who saw commitment as confinement." Over the next several weeks, our morning conversations became the part of each day I looked forward to most. David told me about the challenges of co-parenting, his worries about Sophie, his hopes for advancing in his career. I found myself sharing things I hadn't talked about with anyone, how the fertility treatments had gradually consumed our marriage, how isolated I'd felt when friends started having babies easily, how Mason's affair had made me question my judgment about everything. "You know what I admire about you?" David said one morning in early November. You didn't let what happened make you bitter. You threw yourself into work and got better instead of getting stuck. Some days I feel pretty bitter, I admitted. But you don't act from that place. You're kind to people, you're generous with your time and expertise. Yesterday, I watched you spend an hour helping Kevin with his presentation even though you had your own deadlines. I hadn't realized David had noticed that. The way you are with Sophie, he continued, it's natural. She asks about you during the week, you know. When is Jennifer coming to my game? Can we invite Jennifer for pizza? My heart did that fluttering thing again. She asks about me? Constantly. She told her mom about you last weekend. Described you as Dad's friend who's really nice and knows about everything. The thought of being part of Sophie's mental landscape, someone she thought about and talked about, touched me in a way I hadn't expected. David, I said carefully, are we becoming friends? He smiled, and something in his expression made my pulse quicken. I'd like to think so. Though if I'm being honest, I've been hoping for something more than friendship. The air in the small conference room seemed to shift. We'd been building toward this moment for weeks, but having it stated directly still took my breath away. I've been hoping for that too, I said quietly. Jennifer, I need you to know that if we pursue this, I'm not looking for something casual. Sophie's been through enough upheaval. I only want to introduce serious relationships into her life. What makes you think I'd want casual? I asked. Nothing. Everything about you suggests you're someone who values commitment and building something real. That's what I want too. 14 months after Mason walked out of our kitchen, someone was telling me they wanted to build something real with me. Not despite my struggles, but with full knowledge of them. That afternoon, David asked if I'd like to have dinner with him on Saturday. Not a group outing with Sophie, not a casual coffee, an actual date. I'd love to, I said. As I watched him walk back to his office, I realized I was nervous in a way I hadn't been since high school. Not the anxious desperation of trying to save a failing marriage, but the exciting nervousness of new possibility. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to what might happen next. You know, watching Jennifer slowly open her heart again reminds me that healing doesn't happen overnight. Have you ever had someone help you see your own worth when you'd forgotten it yourself? Someone who made you realize that your past struggles don't define your future possibilities? Please share your experiences in the comments. These stories of resilience and second chances truly matter. And if Jennifer's journey is touching your heart, I hope you'll subscribe to Revenge with Nick. Your support helps me continue bringing these meaningful stories to people who need to hear them. Our first official date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. I'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a blue dress that made me feel confident without trying too hard. David was already waiting when I arrived, standing when he saw me approach the table. You look beautiful, he said simply, and I believed him. The conversation flowed as easily as our morning coffees, but with an undercurrent of romantic possibility that made everything feel more significant. David told me about his college years, his decision to go into marketing, his dreams of eventually starting his own consulting firm. What about you? He asked as we shared tiramisu. Before fertility treatments and Mason's betrayal, what were your dreams? It was a question I hadn't considered in years. I used to want to work for a nonprofit, I said slowly. Marketing for organizations that actually help people instead of just selling products. What kind of nonprofit? Maybe something focused on women's health or family support services. I thought about it a lot during the fertility process, how isolating and confusing it can be. How much better it would be if there were better resources, better emotional support. David was quiet for a moment. That's still possible, you know. Those dreams don't have to stay buried because one chapter of your life didn't go as planned. On our second date, he took me to an art museum. We wandered through galleries, talking about everything and nothing, and I found myself relaxing in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I have a confession, David said as we sat on a bench in front of a painting of a garden in bloom. I've wanted to ask you out since about the 3rd week I started working with you. Really? What took you so long? I wanted to make sure you were interested in me, not just rebounding from your divorce. And I needed to be certain about my own feelings before involving Sophie in any capacity. His consideration for both my emotional state and his daughter's well-being made me respect him even more. What convinced you? I asked. The way you handle everything. Work pressure, difficult clients, my complicated schedule with Sophie. You're steady and kind and genuine. You don't create drama, you solve problems. After 6 weeks of dating, David invited me to his house for dinner. It was a modest 2-bedroom place with Sophie's artwork covering the refrigerator and family photos on every surface. Sophie helped me plan the menu, he said, leading me into the kitchen. She insisted we make your favorite pasta. The evening was comfortable and domestic in ways that felt both new and familiar. Sophie showed me her room, her art supplies, her collection of books. David cooked while I helped Sophie with homework, and for a few hours, we felt like a family unit. Jennifer, Sophie said as I was helping her organize her backpack for the next day, are you my dad's girlfriend now? The directness of the question caught me off guard. What do you think about that? I think it's good. Dad smiles more when he talks about you. And you're fun to be around. Out of the mouths of babes. After Sophie went to bed, David and I sat on his couch, talking quietly. She likes you, he said unnecessarily. I like her too. She's incredible, David. Smart and funny and kind. You should be proud. I am. But I'm also terrified of screwing up her childhood with my decisions about relationships. I understood his caution completely. What do you need from me to feel comfortable about this? Honesty. If you're not ready for the reality of dating someone with a child, if you're not sure about wanting something serious, please tell me now before Sophie gets more attached. I took his hand, looking directly into his eyes. David, I'm not using you to get over Mason, and I'm not playing house to fill some void. I care about you genuinely. And I already care about Sophie. If you're worried about my commitment, don't be. That was the night David first kissed me. Soft and tentative at first, then deeper as I responded. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I haven't felt this way about anyone since before my marriage ended, he whispered. Neither have I. We took our time building the relationship. David introduced me to his close friends, and I introduced him to my family. My parents, who'd been worried about me since the divorce, were immediately charmed by his thoughtfulness and how he talked about Sophie. He's nothing like Mason, my mother observed after David left from Sunday dinner. This one sees you clearly. 8 months into our relationship, David and I took Sophie on a weekend camping trip. Watching him teach her to set up a tent, seeing how patiently he answered her endless questions about nature, I felt something click into place in my heart. This was what partnership looked like. Not two people desperately trying to achieve a shared goal, but a team supporting each other through daily joys and challenges. That night, as Sophie slept in her small tent nearby, David and I lay in sleeping bags looking up at stars. Jennifer, he said quietly, I'm falling in love with you. My breath caught. I'm falling in love with you too. It had taken me 14 months to rebuild my life after Mason left, and another 8 months to build something new with David. But lying there under the stars, listening to Sophie's peaceful breathing, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I had no idea that our happiness was about to create an opportunity I'd never imagined. 2 weeks after the camping trip, I was sitting in Dr. Martinez's office for my annual checkup, answering routine questions about my health and lifestyle. Any chance you could be pregnant? She asked, as she had every year since I'd started seeing her. No, I said automatically, then paused. David and I had been using protection, but we'd gotten somewhat relaxed about it lately. And now that I thought about it, my cycle had been off for the past month. Actually, maybe we should check, I said. Just to be sure. 20 minutes later, Dr. Martinez returned with an expression I couldn't read. Jennifer, the test is positive. You're pregnant. The room seemed to tilt. That's not possible. I mean, I know it's possible, but I spent 3 years trying to get pregnant with Mason. We had tests, treatments. Sometimes fertility issues are more complex than we initially realize, Dr. Martinez said gently. Stress can play a significant role. The emotional strain of your marriage ending, then the stress reduction as you've rebuilt your life. These changes could have affected your hormone levels. I sat in my car in the medical building parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to process this information. Pregnant. After 3 years of charts and injections and disappointment, I was pregnant with a man I'd been dating for 8 months. The irony was overwhelming, but so was the fear. What if David felt trapped? What if this pregnancy put the same pressure on our relationship that had destroyed my marriage? That evening, David was making dinner at his place while Sophie did homework at the kitchen table. I'd been quiet all day, and I could see him watching me with concern. "Sophie, sweetie, why don't you finish your homework in your room?" David suggested. "I need to talk to Jennifer about grown-up stuff." Once we were alone, David turned to face me. "What's wrong? You've been somewhere else all evening." "David, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that I don't expect anything from you. You didn't sign up for this." His face grew serious. "Jennifer, you're scaring me." "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." The silence stretched for what felt like forever. David's expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something I couldn't identify. "How do you feel about that?" I asked, my voice barely steady. David stepped closer, his hands gently taking my shoulders. "How do I feel?" "Jennifer, this is incredible news." "Incredible?" I searched his face for any sign of panic or resentment. "Yes, incredible. We're going to have a baby." His voice was filled with wonder, not fear. "I know this probably feels overwhelming given your history with Mason, but this is different. We're different." Tears I'd been holding back all day finally spilled over. "David, I spent 3 years desperately trying to get pregnant, and it destroyed my marriage. What if this ruins what we have?" He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "Listen to me. What destroyed your marriage wasn't the struggle to have a baby. It was Mason's inability to support you through difficulty. This baby isn't a problem to solve, it's a miracle we get to experience together. But we've only been together 8 months. This changes everything." "Yes, it does. It makes everything more wonderful and more complicated and more real." He pulled back to look at me. "Jennifer, I've been hoping we were building toward a future together. This baby just means our future is arriving sooner than we planned." The relief in my chest was so intense I started crying harder. "Are you happy about this?" David asked gently. Terrified and happy and grateful and completely overwhelmed, I managed through tears. "That sounds about right for finding out you're going to be parents." That night, after we told Sophie the news, which resulted in her doing a victory dance around the living room and immediately starting to plan how to decorate the baby's room, David and I lay in bed talking about the future. "What do you think Mason would say if he knew?" David asked quietly. "I don't know, and I don't care," I realized as I said it. For 3 years, every aspect of my reproductive health was about him, his timeline, his frustrations, his needs. "This pregnancy is about us, our family, our joy." "Good," David said, his hand resting on my still flat stomach. "Because this baby is going to be so loved." At 12 weeks pregnant, I was feeling confident enough to share the news at work. I'd been nervous about how the announcement would affect my career trajectory, but David encouraged me to trust in the relationships I'd built. "You've proven yourself invaluable to this company," he said. "They'd be idiots to let pregnancy change how they see your potential." He was right. When I told my team, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Even better, my current project, a campaign for a family wellness brand, was performing exceptionally well, and I'd just been assigned to lead the entire account. "Jennifer," David said during a team meeting, maintaining his professional tone despite the personal circumstances, "your insights into family dynamics and emotional messaging have made this our most successful campaign this year. I'm recommending you for promotion to marketing director." Marketing director. 2 years ago, I'd been a coordinator going through the motions. Now I was being promoted to leadership while pregnant with the child I'd dreamed of for years. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it felt like justice rather than coincidence. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and comprehensive benefits that would make maternity leave financially comfortable. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly secure, emotionally, professionally, and financially. "I'm proud of you," David said that evening as we celebrated with Sophie over ice cream. "You've worked incredibly hard for this." "We both have," I said, looking at the life we were building together. "I couldn't have done this without your support." Sophie, now excited about becoming a big sister, raised her spoon. "To Jennifer's new job and our new baby." As we laughed and toasted with ice cream, I felt a contentment I'd never experienced before. Not the desperate happiness of trying to make something work, but the steady joy of something that was working naturally. I was 6 months pregnant when everything changed again, but not in a way I could have predicted. I was updating my LinkedIn profile with my new title when a message notification popped up. The name made my stomach drop. Mason Henderson. Congratulations on your promotion and your pregnancy news. I was hoping we could talk. There are things I need to say to you. Mason. I stared at the message for several minutes, my heart pounding. Mason. The man who'd walked away from our marriage because fertility struggles had made our life too clinical, too difficult. Now he wanted to talk because I was successful and pregnant. I showed the message to David that evening. How do you feel about seeing him? David asked, his voice carefully neutral. I don't want to see him at all, I said immediately. But I'm also curious about what he could possibly have to say after 18 months of silence. Whatever you decide, I support you. But remember, you don't owe him anything. Not your time, not your attention, and definitely not an explanation of your happiness. The next morning, Mason was waiting in our office building lobby when I arrived for work. He looked older, somehow diminished from the confident man who'd left me. His suit was expensive but seemed to hang on him awkwardly. Jennifer, he said, standing as he saw me. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I didn't agree to anything, I said coolly. What are you doing here, Mason? I saw your promotion announcement. And the pregnancy news. I wanted to congratulate you and apologize. The elevator arrived, and I stepped in without inviting him to follow. He got in anyway. I don't need your congratulations or your apology, I said as the doors closed. Jennifer, please. I know I handled our situation badly. I've been thinking about us, about what went wrong, and I realize I made a terrible mistake. The elevator opened on my floor, and I stepped out, Mason following. Mason, stop. Just stop. I turned to face him in the hallway. You made your choice 18 months ago. You decided our marriage was too much work, that I was too broken to be worth fighting for. You don't get to show up now that my life is good and pretend you made a mistake. But you're pregnant, he said, as if that proved some point. It worked out. We could have what? Mason, do you even hear yourself? You're not congratulating me on building a beautiful life with someone who loves me. You're suggesting that my pregnancy somehow vindicates your decision to abandon me. People were starting to stare, and I realized our conversation was attracting attention in the professional environment I'd worked so hard to establish myself in. Let's go to the conference room, I said, not wanting to create more of a scene. Once we were behind closed doors, Mason's demeanor shifted. Jennifer, I know you're angry, but I need you to understand. Victoria and it didn't work out. She was demanding, controlling. Nothing like you. I realize now that what we had was special. The audacity was breathtaking. So you're here because your rebound relationship failed? I'm here because I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left you. Seeing you pregnant, successful, happy, it made me realize what I lost. What you lost. My voice was rising. Mason, you didn't lose anything. You threw it away. You chose to throw it away rather than support me through a difficult time. The fertility treatments were consuming our lives. The fertility treatments were us trying to build the family you said you wanted. And the moment it got difficult, the moment I needed you most, you bailed and found someone easier. Mason's expression hardened in a way I remembered from our worst fights. That's not fair, Jennifer. You became obsessed. Every conversation was about ovulation cycles and hormone levels. We stopped being a couple and became a medical procedure. Because I was trying to give you what you said you wanted. A baby, Mason. You wanted children, and when it wasn't easy, you decided I was defective and found someone who could give you what I couldn't. But you weren't defective, he said, gesturing toward my obviously pregnant belly. You just needed the right circumstances. The implication hung in the air like poison. That David had somehow provided the right circumstances that Mason couldn't. At that moment, David appeared in the conference room doorway. Is everything all right? He asked, his tone professional, but his eyes assessing the tension in the room. David, this is Mason, my ex-husband, I said. Mason, this is David, my boyfriend and the father of my baby. The two men sized each other up, and the contrast was stark. David radiated quiet confidence and genuine concern for my well-being. Mason looked defensive and entitled. I was just explaining to Jennifer that I think we made a mistake ending our marriage, Mason said, apparently deciding to address David directly. David's voice was dangerously calm. From what Jennifer's told me, you made a unilateral decision to end your marriage and pursue someone else. That doesn't sound like a mutual mistake. You don't understand the full situation, Mason said dismissively. Jennifer and I have history, shared experiences. You're right, I don't understand, David interrupted. I don't understand how someone could walk away from an incredible woman during the most difficult period of her life. I don't understand how someone could see her current happiness and think they have any right to disrupt it. The protective edge in David's voice made my heart race, but not with fear. With gratitude. Mason, I said firmly, you need to leave. Now. David and I are building a life together, and you have no place in it. Jennifer, just think about what we had. What we had, I said, standing up, was a marriage where I felt like I was failing every day. What I have now is a partnership where I feel valued and supported. The difference is night and day. Mason's face flushed with anger. So you're choosing him? After everything we shared. The question revealed everything I needed to know about Mason's state of mind. Even 18 months after leaving me, he still believed he had some claim on my future. I'm choosing happiness, Mason. I'm choosing to be with someone who loves me during difficult times, not just easy ones. I'm choosing to build a family with someone who sees challenges as something we face together, not something that makes me disposable. You'll regret this, Mason said, his mask slipping completely. When the novelty wears off, when real life gets difficult, you'll remember what we had. What we had, I said clearly, was you abandoning me when I needed you most. What I have now is someone who chooses me every single day. There's no comparison. Security arrived at that point. David had discreetly called them when Mason became argumentative. As Mason was escorted from the building, he called back, "This isn't over, Jennifer. You're making a mistake." But I knew it was over. Looking at David, seeing the way he'd supported me through that confrontation without trying to control it, I felt the last piece of my old life finally click into place. Are you okay? David asked once we were alone. I'm perfect, I said, and meant it completely. You know, watching Jennifer stand up to Mason reminds me how important it is to recognize our own worth. Have you ever had someone from your past try to reclaim you after you'd built something better? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories of choosing yourself over settling for less. And if you're inspired by Jennifer's strength, please consider subscribing to Revenge with Nick. These stories of empowerment and growth need to reach people who might be in similar situations. 3 months later, I gave birth to Emma Rose Williams. Yes, Williams, because David and I had gotten married in a small ceremony when I was 7 months pregnant. Sophie had been my maid of honor, and David's vows had made everyone cry. Jennifer, he'd said, you've taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose struggles and strengths complement your own. You've made me a better man, a better father, and now you're giving us the greatest gift imaginable. Emma was perfect, healthy, alert, with David's eyes and what my mother insisted was my stubborn chin. The birth was everything the fertility treatments had promised, but never delivered. A celebration of life created in love, not desperation. Sophie was absolutely devoted to her baby sister, insisting on helping with every feeding, every diaper change, every small milestone. She likes it when I sing to her, Sophie announced proudly during Emma's first week home. I think she knows I'm her big sister. David was an incredible partner throughout the early weeks of parenthood. While I recovered and adjusted to breastfeeding, he handled night feedings with pumped milk, managed the household, and somehow still made sure Sophie felt included and important. How are you so good at this? I asked him one evening as he expertly swaddled Emma while simultaneously helping Sophie with homework. Practice, he said with a smile. And motivation. This is what I've wanted for years, a real family with someone who wants to build it with me, not someone who feels trapped by it. At 3 months old, Emma was sleeping better, and I was preparing to return to work part-time. The company had been incredibly accommodating, allowing me to work from home 3 days a week and maintain my director-level responsibilities. It was during this time that I learned what had happened to Mason. I was having lunch with my friend Rachel when she brought up his name. "I heard Mason's been having a rough time," she said casually. "Victoria left him about 6 months ago. Apparently she started seeing her personal trainer." I felt a flicker of, not satisfaction exactly, but recognition. "How do you know all this?" "My cousin works with Victoria," said. Mason was devastated, kept talking about how women always leave him when things get complicated. The irony was perfect. Mason, who'd left me because our life had become too challenging, was abandoned by Victoria when their relationship required effort. "He's apparently been asking people about you," Rachel continued. "Wanting to know about your life, your marriage, the baby." "What kind of questions?" "Nothing threatening, just fishing for information. I think he's realizing what he lost." I looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in her carrier beside our table, then thought about David at home having a father-daughter afternoon with Sophie. "He didn't lose anything," I said. "He gave it away." "There's a difference." Later that evening, I told David about the conversation. "How does it make you feel, knowing he's struggling?" David asked. I considered the question seriously. Sad for him, I guess. But not guilty. He made his choices based on his character, and now he's experiencing the natural consequences. No desire for revenge? No satisfaction in his pain? Honestly? No. My life is too full of good things to waste energy on Mason's problems. He's irrelevant to my happiness now. That was when I realized I'd completed the journey from devastation to contentment. Mason's struggles didn't make my happiness sweeter. My happiness existed independently of anything happening in his life. 2 weeks later, I received one final message from Mason through a mutual friend. He wanted me to know he was sorry, that he understood now what he'd given up, and that he hoped I was happy. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. That chapter of my life was complete, filed away like old tax returns, necessary for a while, but no longer relevant to current circumstances. Jennifer's story shows us that sometimes what feels like the end is really just the beginning of something better. The best revenge isn't making someone pay for hurting you. It's building a life so fulfilling that their absence becomes irrelevant. Have you ever reached that point where someone's attempt to hurt you just bounced off because you were too happy to care? Share your stories of rising above in the comments below. And if Jennifer's journey has inspired you, please subscribe to Revenge with Nick. These stories of transformation and triumph need to reach everyone who's ever felt broken by someone else's choices. 2 years after Emma was born, I was featured in Marketing Today magazine as one of their 35 under 35 professionals to watch. The article focused on my innovative approach to family-centered marketing campaigns and my success in building inclusive workplace policies for parents. The photo accompanying the article showed me in my office, with a small framed picture on my desk, David, Sophie, Emma, and me at the beach last summer. Sophie was teaching Emma to build sandcastles while David and I watched from beach chairs, his arm around my shoulders. We looked like what we were. A blended family that had found its rhythm, built on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and genuine affection. That same week, I ran into someone who'd known Mason and me during our marriage. She congratulated me on the article and asked about my amazing transformation. "You seem like a completely different person than you were back then," she said. "So much more confident and settled." "I think I'm actually the same person I always was," I replied after thinking about it. I just needed the right circumstances to flourish instead of just survive. The truth was, the woman Mason had fallen in love with, ambitious, funny, resilient, had never disappeared. She'd just been buried under years of medical stress and emotional neglect. David hadn't changed me. He'd created space for me to remember who I was. Later that evening, after the girls were in bed, David and I sat on our back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and marveling at how perfectly ordinary and extraordinarily wonderful our life had become. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Mason hadn't left?" David asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I think I would have eventually gotten pregnant, but I would have been miserable. Mason would have resented the lifestyle changes, probably had another affair when parenting got difficult. We would have raised a child in a house full of resentment and disappointment. And now? I looked through the window at Sophie's room, where she was reading a bedtime story to Emma through the baby monitor, then back at David. Now I understand that some endings are actually beginnings in disguise. Mason leaving forced me to discover what I was capable of independently. Meeting you taught me what partnership actually looks like. Having Emma showed me that the timing we plan isn't always the timing we need. David reached for my hand. Any regrets? None. Even the painful parts led to something necessary. I needed to learn that my worth wasn't dependent on Mason's approval or anyone else's. I needed to prove to myself that I could build a career and a life based on my own capabilities. And I needed to learn that not every relationship ends in betrayal, that it's possible to find someone who sees family as an adventure rather than a burden. As I write this, Emma is 3 years old, Sophie is 12 and thriving as a big sister, and David and I are discussing the possibility of having another baby. The conversation is relaxed, hopeful, free from the desperation and clinical precision that characterized my first attempts at motherhood. We might have another child, or we might decide our family is perfect as it is. Either way, the decision will be made from a place of abundance and joy, not from trying to fix something broken or prove something to someone else. Sometimes I wonder if Mason ever thinks about the family he could have had. But mostly, I don't think about Mason at all. He's become what he should have been all along, irrelevant to my happiness. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't making someone pay for hurting you. It's building a life so fulfilling that their absence becomes a gift rather than a loss. Thank you for staying with me through Jennifer's entire journey. Her story reminds us that our worst moments don't define us, how we rise from them does. If you've ever felt abandoned, betrayed, or broken by someone's choices, remember that your story isn't over. Your next chapter might be the best one yet. Please share this video with anyone who needs to hear Jennifer's message of hope and resilience. Leave a comment telling me what part of her journey resonated most with you. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Nick, because everyone deserves to know that their pain can become their power, and their endings can become their beginnings. Remember, the best revenge is a life well lived. But the best life is one where revenge doesn't matter anymore because you're too busy being happy.